As the first woman to be elected district attorney here in Denver, what sort of challenges have you faced in that role?
Well, law enforcement hasn't traditionally been a female role or female profession. So I think there are a lot of people who don't think women should, or don't think women do this job as well as a man might do. So I think that's there's been a bit of that. However, in the office itself, really there's been I have not felt that at all. We have so many talented women attorneys and staff that I think I've heard them say that they really appreciate having a woman as the DA. I think there's always this thing about women being soft, soft on crime, which I'm not, and I don't think this office is. In fact, I know it isn't. So you have to kind of overcome that. But I do think women bring some characteristics to the job that are important that sometimes men don't. My experience with women is that women tend to be very detail-oriented, which is really important for trial lawyers, because every detail is important, especially in the criminal law. Mm-hmm. And I think women work really hard. They always say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy woman. I think that's true. So, and I also think women bring a little bit broader perspective in many ways to the criminal justice system. At least that's my philosophy, that it's a balance of tough prosecution when you need it. Certain people have to be out of circulation. They're just dangerous people. But a lot of people get into the system because of mental health issues, substance abuse, family dysfunction. And I think those people, depending on the nature of the crime, of course, but those people, we have an opportunity to help prevent them from continuing in that criminal path. And we can hopefully make a difference in their lives by providing alternatives. So I think perhaps women have a little bit broader view of the world and the role of criminal justice.
And now in the office you have more women prosecutors
Yes.
than you do have men prosecutors.
Yes.
What advice do you give women who are becoming these new prosecutors?
So I tell them to work hard and to exercise good judgment, not to be afraid to ask for help, and to do their best. It's really not that much different than what I would tell a young male attorney. And I think now I've had monthly lunches for a while with women attorneys just to talk about some of the issues. And I think by and large they are not feeling that they're being held to a different standard or something of that nature in the courtrooms. We have a lot of women judges now. So I think generally if they work hard and they make good decisions, they're going to be successful.
Yeah. A lot has happened over the last
Yes.
8 years in your office.
Yes.
I mean, in the city, and we could, talk for hours about what has happened in Denver while you were in office. What are some of the accomplishments that you're most happy about?
Yeah, so I feel like I've been able to add some really important functions of the office. So on the enforcement side, I started a human trafficking unit, which has been very successful. We've filed over 100 cases in the last few years. I filed an elder and at-risk. I started an elder and at-risk unit. As I'm a baby boomer, as we get older, we're going to be more subject to crime. So very pleased that that unit has been very successful. And I started a firearms relinquishment program. So there's a law that says domestic violence offenders cannot possess or purchase weapons. I found out, I actually passed a law in the legislature related to that, but then I found out it wasn't being enforced. So I now have a full-time investigator whose job it is to look through all our domestic violence cases and find out if there are guns available to that person, and then they have to relinquish them. And so we have a follow-through, so the law is getting enforced.
Yeah. What are some of the failures in your office that you wish you could go back and fix?
I don't know that I would say they're failures. I think that The whole George Floyd protest period was a tough time for the office, and I think I don't know that I would have done anything differently, but I do feel like it was a challenge. It was a challenge for the office. I think we got through it successfully because there was such a backlash against prosecutors and law enforcement that we continue to try to make sure we build trust with the community. And that was one of the things that I feel like is a continual issue that I've always been concerned about, but I think it will continue for the next district attorney, is the whole issue of the involvement of kids in so much violent crime. Mm-hmm. We've done some things, like we started a handgun intervention program for young people who have guns. We have an adult program for people who are picked up for gun possession. But in terms of actually addressing the root causes, I don't feel that I've been able to do as much as I would have liked to do in that respect.
Why not?
Because it's a really multifaceted issue. We can prosecute them, which we do, and I have ended up filing directly in felony court against juveniles more than I thought I would because of the nature of the crimes and the backgrounds of some of these young people. But we as a community, as a society, really need to be putting more resources, I think, into the whole issue of poverty, giving these kids hope, job opportunities, education. It's a much bigger issue than just criminal justice. Because we can put them in prison, which we do, but there's another one right behind them, and I think we have to get at it a little earlier, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that goes into my next question here. Your office has received some criticism from public officials for not doing enough with repeat offenders. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to that criticism at the end of your term here?
I think we've done really well. I don't think that is a legitimate criticism. When we have repeat offenders, we do take that into account if we're doing a plea agreement or going to trial. And that's one of the things we look at for bond arguments. And it may be in the bond context that you're thinking. So what we do is we look at someone's background. The pretrial services department does a whole pretrial assessment of someone who's arrested, and they give them a score on how likely they are to fail to appear or to be a risk. It's called a risk assessment. So the judge gets that, hear our argument, the public defender makes an argument, and the judge ultimately decides. I do want my attorneys to keep in mind that the purpose of bond is really for making sure people are going to show up in court. They're not guilty until they're proven guilty. And so we don't want to, incarcerate people who simply can't make a small bond, whereas somebody who can make a huge bond can get out. So it's a balance. We have to look at all those factors. But I feel like we've done a good job of that.
Yeah. And that stems to my next question here. Denver's crime rate is a constant topic in the news about shootings in downtown, property crime, car thefts have been a huge issue over the last few years, fentanyl. Do you think your office has done enough?
We continue to work on these issues, and I think we have done a good job of addressing crime. Crime is actually down in Denver for the last 2 years. It's been going down, including violent crime. Car thefts are down by 42% over the last 2 years, and that is part of what we've done with the police department. They formed a specific auto theft task force, and I have a policy in my office about focusing on auto theft. So it's been going down really the last 2 years. And I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that crime spike because it was all over the country, and it's coming down all over the country. But I think Denver in particular has really done a good job of focusing on where the crime is taking place. We work very closely with DPD on their strategy. They have a 3-pronged strategy on violent crime. So they stay in touch with us about what areas they think are more susceptible to crime, violent crime, and people who may be more involved in violent crime, so we can focus on those folks in that area, those areas. So I feel like we've really made progress in conjunction with DPD and our federal law partners as well.
Yeah. Your office in the past has also had to drop charges in some cases. Specifically, the Stephen Long case comes to mind. Was it a mistake by your office to charge him?
No, I think at the time he was charged, what was known was enough to charge him. We need probable cause for a charge. But when we get further along in a case, we learn more. We talk to more witnesses, we may get additional physical evidence, and then we have a burden that's different, a burden of we need to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And we try to make that decision up front every day on lots of cases. But particularly when you have a double homicide, you know, you have enough at the time to file, but it is not unusual as particularly a homicide case moves along that we get more information and we have more opportunity to talk amongst ourselves in the office about provability of a case. And so it's a process. Just like we plea bargain cases, we learn more as we work on the cases.
Okay. I want to go back to, well, I have another additional question here. And one thing that you said about the George Floyd era, when that happened, when there were riots in the city and you were prosecuting people connected to the riots downtown. You talked about how difficult that was, and you talked about trust. Do you believe that your office has lost a little bit of trust in the wake of that?
I don't think it's my office as much as perhaps the police department. But I know Chief Thomas is working really hard to restore that trust. And I just want to back up a minute because we were actually focused quite a bit on whether we should prosecute any of the police officers because the city attorney handled a lot of the protests, like the curfew violations. That's handled through the city attorney. We did have some protesters that we filed cases against, and we certainly did do that. But we also had to look at, should we file any cases against police officers, because we had a number of protesters who were very seriously injured. So we spent a lot of time watching body-worn cameras, really trying to figure out what was the right thing to do. We did not end up charging any police officers.
Why is it?
Well, I would say the main reason was because we couldn't identify which officer had actually fired, like, they were firing those rubber bullets or 40 millimeter canisters.
But in a lot of these civil cases, these officers were named.
They were not named. It was filed against the Denver Police Department, which is a whole different thing. There was one case where they did identify an officer, and we contacted that defense attorney and asked him, how did you identify? And he never got back to us about that. We tried to a couple times to find out, because we watched those body worns, and often it was a line of officers. Sometimes there were Aurora police officers, sometimes they were Denver, and they would all kind of fire at the same time. And it was, in the cases, there were a couple cases where we could identify the officer, but in those cases we concluded that the officer had enough had a reasonable belief in their own safety, that they had enough reason to fire whatever it was they were firing. It was hard. It was a hard time, I think, for anyone in law enforcement. Yeah.
What advice are you leaving for the next district attorney?
Well, I've asked him, and he has committed to carrying on some of these programs that I've started, not just the ones I mentioned, but also I started a very robust adult diversion program, which has been growing. We have now a very also robust restorative justice program, which is growing. And so I believe in those alternatives, like I mentioned, the handgun intervention program for the kids. And we have a conviction review unit, which looks at, was someone convicted that was actually innocent, or should a sentence be reduced because it's disproportionate? So those are the kinds of things that I feel very strongly about, and he has told me he will continue those. So that's one thing we've talked about. There's some inner office things that I think we could look at structure-wise. that he might want to take a look at. And I think he doesn't need too much of my advice. He's an experienced leader, and but I, I've talked to him about the relationship with the police department and how important that is, but also having to be independent because we have to investigate and prosecute police officers as well. And then we've gone through just kind of nuts and bolts things, like little things that he might want to tweak, or that I do, like I have certain meetings that I've set up and he might want to continue those. But he's been out in the community a lot, and he's been here I gave him an office in the office to make the transition
almost
easier.
like a transition office.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
and he's had a transition team that's been interviewing people in groups, and then he's been meeting individually with people. So I think he's well prepared.
Yeah. A lot of people, they have perceptions of the justice system from what they see on television, like in shows, in crime shows, and what they see in the news. What would you like people to take away from your legacy as the district attorney here?
Well, I think people should understand that this office and really the law enforcement officers are doing this job because they believe in the mission and they believe in public safety. They believe that it's important work. And so I think it's the kind of work that puts us in positions to be dealing with people in the most difficult times in their lives. They're victims of crime, they're defendants, their families are affected, their friends are affected. So I want people to understand that the people here in this office work really hard, and they really have a lot of compassion for victims of crime, and they want to make this system work as best as it can. For my legacy, I would hope that I'm remembered as someone who had that balanced approach. So we have tough prosecution, but we also have compassion, and we look at a case on a broader spectrum than just, this crime happened. We look at what caused it, what is the best way to keep the community safe? Does this person need to go to prison for life because they've taken a life? Or does this person have an ability to change, and how could that best be accomplished? So it's a balanced approach, and I think we've been able to do that pretty well. There are always individual cases where things go wrong, but overall, I want people to know that people in this office believe in this, and they want the community to trust them, and they want to build that trust, and so that's what people are working for.
Yeah. Personally, are you going on to do any more advocacy work now that you're leaving this office?
Oh, I'm sure I will at some point.
What's the next step for you?
Well, I'm not, I don't have like another job,
Sure.
but I'm going to take some time off, do some traveling. We talked about I'm interested in elephants and helping with the anti-poaching effort in Africa, and I'm going to Africa in the spring to try to pursue that. But I'll be involved in politics probably because I'm interested in that.
Are you thinking about running for office?
No, I'm not thinking about running for office, but I'm going to be helping people who are running for office. And I really am committed to trying to work on the juvenile justice issues because that's something I feel pretty strongly about, and I want to see us do a better job in that area. So hopefully I'll be able to find a niche there too.
Great. What do you think is going to be the most pressing issue for the next DA?
Well, I do think I think guns, fentanyl, and juvenile violence are probably the big ones. We didn't, you asked me about fentanyl, I didn't mention, but I also had a new policy about being more aggressive about fentanyl distribution. And we have this new law, distribution resulting in death. So we've been trying to charge that, which is a much more serious charge than just distribution. But we're taking the fentanyl issue very seriously. But that is a really big issue, and there is a lot of it in Denver. And I think there will be more synthetic drugs developed because it's easier and it's cheaper for people. So I would like to see more, well, you asked me challenges. I think fentanyl and drug addiction are going to be two really big ones. The presence of illegal guns in our community is pretty overwhelming. So I think trying to work more on issues around guns will be a big challenge. And then again, the juvenile issues I think are going to be big.
Great. It was so great to hear from you on your last day in office, or your last 2 days in office.
Yeah.
You've got one more.
1.5.
Any other final thoughts you'd like to leave?
No, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the city and the residents, the workers, trying to keep the community safe. It's been very fulfilling and satisfying, and also very challenging. So
I'm sure you're ready for some time off.
Yeah, I am looking forward to not having that 3 o'clock in the middle of the night call that an officer has shot someone. So that'll be nice. But I also am confident that, you know, John Walsh will do an excellent job, and so it's a bit of a relief to know that I feel confident that he'll take over and probably, you know, think of some new things and move the city forward even more.